There's a paradox at the center of every relationship with a narcissist that most people never get close enough to see, and it looks like this. They are terrified of change. Any shift in routine, any nudge toward growth, any moment where the relationship asks something of them that feels new, it triggers what looks like panic or rage or cold, sharp withdrawal. And at the same time, they cannot stop changing things. They rotate through jobs, friendships, social circles, aesthetics, stories about who they are. They're in constant motion, but none of it goes anywhere. It's performance, not progress. So which is it? Are they afraid of change or are they addicted to it? Both. And the reason both is the same reason. For the narcissist, stability does not feel like safety, it feels like death, because to them, the two are the same. And once you understand why, you'll understand the confusing moments in narcissistic relationships, like the silent treatments that follow any attempt to set a boundary, the explosions that greet any request for consistency, the way they seem to destroy good things and purpose, over and over. And that's what we're going to unpack today. This is Sex, Lies, and Cluster B, Episode 5. Here's the foundational mechanism to understand everything else. A healthy view is that we can hold two truths at once. I am me, and the world is the world. My internal landscape, my feelings, my memories, my sense of who I am, is mine. The external world is out there. I can influence it, I can shape it, but I don't mistake it for an extension of my nervous system. The narcissist cannot hold this distinction. In the narcissist's psychology, as Beckman describes it, there is a profound confusion between the internal environment and the external environment. The internal environment is everything they have introjected. Introject, for a narcissist, means other people converted into mental objects, relationships frozen into images, emotional experiences stored as fixed snapshots. All of this feels as real to them as the physical world. More real, actually. So when something changes in the external world, a partner gets a new haircut, a friend moves to a different city, a family member asserts an opinion that wasn't there before, the narcissist does not experience it as the world changing. They experience it as themselves changing, as part of themselves being altered, removed, or threatened. Any environmental shift is perceived as self-annihilation by the narcissist. Think about that. Now, to understand why this confusion is so catastrophic, you need to understand how the narcissist regulates themselves. Healthy people develop what Vecnin calls an internal ego function, or internal ego functions. You develop an internal capacity to evaluate your own worth, to test reality, to regulate your emotions, to hold a stable sense of who you are even when the outside world is chaotic. You can be criticized and still know your value. You can be rejected and still regulate. The thermostat is inside you. The narcissist outsourced all of this. Their sense of worth lives in other people's responses. Their reality testing depends on external validation. Their emotional regulation happens through supply, through the narcissist's ability to control how others perceive and respond to them. Remove the external regulation, and they do not become independent, they collapse. This is why environmental change feels so catastrophic. When the environment is the self, when other people's perceptions, responses, and availability are the core of your identity, then any shift in the environment is not an inconvenience, it's a wound to the self. Now layer one more effect of this confusion. If the internal world is the same as the external world, and that internal world is organized around a fragile, grandiose, false self that is in constant danger of collapse, then the narcissist experiences the external world as essentially hostile. Not because it's actually hostile, but because any change in it threatens the internal equilibrium. So the narcissist converts everyone in their environment into a persecutor. Even people who love them, even people who have done nothing but support them. Vaknin describes how the narcissist constructs what he calls paranoid counterfactual narratives. These are elaborate stories about how other people are working against them, plotting against them, trying to expose or diminish or control them. These narratives are not rooted in reality, but they are experienced as completely real because the narcissist confuses their internal world with the external one. You can recognize this in practice. The partner who is told constantly that they are not doing enough, that their motives are suspect, that they are secretly aligned with enemies. The friend who is informed that their success is a personal attack. The family member whose boundaries are reframed as betrayal. Everyone becomes an enemy, and the narcissist feels like a victim of a vast, hostile conspiracy, when really they're experiencing their own internal terror of change projected onto everyone around them. So here's where this goes from psychological to physical. The developmental origin goes like this. The narcissist, as a child, experienced early trauma. This trauma, and this is consistent with broader trauma research, activated a freeze response, not fight or flight, freeze. The freeze response is what happens when an animal is trapped. The nervous system shuts down, immobilizes the body, reduces pain sensitivity, slows metabolism. It's a last resort survival mechanism, and when it becomes a chronic trait rather than an acute reaction, it becomes a way of being. The narcissist freezes themselves. They are in a chronic state of internal immobility, a kind of suspended animation. And then because they are incapable of tolerating change in their environment, they freeze everyone around them. Snapshotting, a term by Vaknin, which we'll get into next, is the primary tool for this. They convert the people in their life into still images, frozen, controllable, and predictable. Anyone or anything that threatens to unfreeze the situation, that introduces genuine unpredictability, growth, or change, is experienced as an existential threat. You see this in how the narcissist handles conflict. They do not negotiate, adapt, or compromise. They either collapse into a kind of numb withdrawal, or they escalate until the other person freezes too. The pattern is always toward re-establishing stasis. The pattern is always toward stopping the clock. So let's talk about snapshotting. Vaknin introduced this idea at the beginning of every relationship, romantic, friendship, or professional relationship. The narcissist interjects the other person. They take a mental snapshot, an image of who this person is, what they want, how they behave, and what they will give. This snapshot is stable. It doesn't change. Why do they do this? Because a static image is controllable. A static image cannot reject you, abandon you, or surprise you. It cannot grow in a direction you didn't anticipate. It cannot develop needs that compete with yours. The snapshot eliminates the terror of the other person as a separate, living, changing being. This is how the narcissist manages abandonment anxiety. Now, by developing genuine object constancy is the emotional capacity to hold on to someone even when they're not present. But by converting the person into an internal object that cannot leave because it was never really outside their head to begin with. The problem, of course, is that people are not snapshots. People change, people grow, they assert autonomy, they develop opinions and preferences and boundaries that diverge from the image the narcissist took on day one. When that happens, The narcissist does not update the snapshot. They panic, they rage, they attack the partner for changing, as if the partner's growth is a betrayal, as if their own internal snapshot should govern how a living human being is allowed to evolve. This is one of the deepest sources of confusion for partners. They are being punished for becoming more themselves. The partner, by becoming more themselves, begin to depart the snapshot and the shared fantasy that the narcissist imposes from the snapshot. Hence, why our new album is titled The Final Shared Fantasy. The narcissist is threatened by the partner's wholeness, not diminished by it. All of this, the environmental confusion, the ego outsourcing, the persecutory paranoia, the freeze response, the snapshotting, traces back to a central structure we talk about a lot, the false self. The false self concept is a dissociative protective structure. It was created originally by a traumatized child. The child was abused, overwhelmed, helpless. The false self emerged as a solution, an imaginary shield that could protect the child psychologically from the pain of that reality. But here's where it goes wrong. The false self did not stay protective, it mummified, it took over, it calcified, it killed the true self. Not literally, but psychologically. The true self, with its vulnerability, its capacity for genuine connection, its ability to feel and grieve and grow, was abandoned and left to atrophy. The false self stepped into its place and became the primary identity. And the false self is rigid. It cannot adapt. It cannot learn from mistakes. It cannot tolerate being wrong, because being wrong would mean the whole structure collapses. So it doubles down. It doubles down on the snapshot, on the persecutory narratives, the freeze response. It cannot evolve, and so it prevents everything else from evolving too. The false self is not interested in the narcissist's well-being. It is interested in the narcissist's survival, which it defines as a perpetuation of its own control. The narcissist uses psychosexuality as a primary tool for anxiety regulation, not for pleasure, not for connection, not for chemical regulation, but for managing the internal terror that comes from a life organized around preventing change at any cost. The narcissist's psychosexuality, Pecknin argues, is often atypical, paraphiliac, or kinky, not in the sense that kinks are pathological, but in the sense that for the narcissist, sex serves a specific psychological function rather than a relational one. It's about control, about reducing anxiety, about confirming grandiosity or managing fear. The content of the sexuality matters less than what it accomplishes internally. It reduces a spike of panic that comes from feeling unable to cope. It provides a hit of grandiosity when the internal supply is running low. It numbs the terror of genuine vulnerability. The narcissist seeks a partner who will legitimize these practices, who will serve as an anchor for the specific form of arousal that keeps their internal system stable. They need someone to say, this is okay, this is wanted, this is normal. Because without that external validation, the anxiety spikes. Without a witness who confirms the script, the whole arrangement collapses back into the void. And this is where the partner's experience becomes important to understand, because the partner almost always gets this wrong about themselves. They think, if I can just meet this need, if I can just be the right kind of giving, the relationship will work. So they perform. They swallow their own discomfort. They override their own boundaries, their own preferences, their own sense of what feels good and what doesn't. They become what the narcissist needs them to be, and they tell themselves, that's love. It's not love. It's a one-person operation presenting as something that looks like a relationship. The partner in this dynamic often describes experiences like they lost track of what they wanted. Not gradually, but completely. Their desires became invisible to them. And it's not because they were never there, but because expressing them was either ignored or punished or met with such elaborate justification from the narcissist that the partner gave up and rearranged themselves around the narcissist's needs instead. This is what it looks like to be a prop. Actually, your job is to be present, available, and affirming of the script you did not write and do not control. Your job is to stabilize the narcissist's nervous system, not to have one of your own. The partner who realizes this, really realizes it, at the level of their body and not just their intellect, typically describes a moment of dissociation, a kind of stepping outside themselves and looking at what they've become. The person who showed up for sex they didn't want because saying no was too costly. The person who performed desire they didn't feel because the alternative was a cold war of withdrawal. The person who forgot that sex is supposed to feel like something, not just look like something from the outside. And this is the part that really stays with people. The narcissist often cannot even perceive this. The partner's disappearance, their surrender, their self-erasure, is not visible to the narcissist because it fits so perfectly into the narcissist's internal narrative. The narcissist sees what they need to see. They experience the partner's compliance as evidence of their own desirability, their own power, their own adequacy. The partner's silence becomes confirmation of the narcissist's grandiosity. When the partner finally names what has been happening, when they say, I have not been okay, I have not been present, I've been performing for years, the narcissist does not usually respond with concern. They respond with injury, because the partner's awakening threatens the entire regulatory architecture. The partner is not playing their role anymore. The prop is stepping off the stage. This is what it looks like when the narcissist needs a partner to legitimize these practices. The partner's consent is a seal of approval that makes the whole system feel real. Without it, the narcissist is alone with a body and a set of compulsions and no internal mechanism for making any of it feel acceptable. The partner's presence is not about love, it's about permission. When that partner cannot be found, and often it's not because the ask is too specific and the capacity for genuine mutuality is limited or too limited, the narcissist retreats into involuntary celibacy or into transient encounters that provide no satisfaction. Because the satisfaction was never in the sex, it was in the external regulation. And a stranger cannot provide that, only an internalized object can. So the sex, even when it happens, is hollow. It was never really about sex at all. So we go into the deeper substitute that I mentioned earlier, the shared fantasy. The shared fantasy is an alternate reality, a paracosm, that the narcissist constructs, often with a partner, sometimes with a wider social circle, that serves as a substitute for genuine intimacy. Within the shared fantasy, the narcissist is the version of themselves they wish they were: powerful, desired, special, untouched by the inadequacy they actually feel. The partner plays their role, the adoring audience, the confirming mirror, the prop in the narcissist's self-authored story. This is the narcissist's organizing principle. It provides meaning, direction, emotional energy. It is the frame through which everything in the relationship is interpreted. The partner in a shared fantasy is not experienced as a separate person. They are a character, a function, an element of the narcissist's internal landscape, that has been projected outward. And the moment they step outside the script, the moment they assert their own needs, their own identity, their own direction, the shared fantasy ruptures. And the narcissist experiences that rupture not as a relationship problem, but as an attack. The shared fantasy is not love. It is a permanent avoidance of love, because love requires accepting the other person as separate, as changeable, as outside your control. The shared fantasy is the refusal of that acceptance at every level. From research from scholars like Twenge, Wade, Zimbardo, and Campbell, there have been a measurable shift in relationship formation nowadays, dating behavior, and sexual activity over recent decades. Vaknin interprets these shifts through the lens of what he calls narcissistic civilization, which is a culture increasingly organized around the principles that govern the narcissist's inner life: image over substance, stimulation over stability, performance over intimacy. That young people are showing elevated rates of narcissistic and psychopathic traits, and that this represents not empowerment, but adoption of the narcissistic defensive structures. The broad pattern looks like this: a culture that rewards grandiosity, that pathologizes vulnerability, that replaces genuine intimacy with curated performance. This is a culture that creates the conditions for these dynamics to flourish in men and women alike. If any of this has landed for you, if you recognize these patterns in a relationship, in a family system, or in your own behavior, that recognition is information. Understanding the dread for change does not fix the narcissist. They are not interested in being fixed. The false self will fight any attempt at genuine change with everything it has. But understanding the dread for change in the narcissist helps you stop internalizing the chaos as your fault. It helps you see that the instability you have been tolerating is not a relationship problem to be solved. It's a feature of the structure. And features don't get negotiated away. They get recognized, and then they get respected, which in this context means protected from. And that's the work. By the time you watch this video, the album Final Shared Fantasy should be out. It's an amazing album with 14 songs that depict relationship dynamics grounded in reality, finally. Hence, the final shared fantasy. Because truth over fantasy is always better. I'll see you in the next video. I'll play with you this song, The Final Shared Fantasy, or Truth Over the Fantasy. Hope you like it.
I knew the room was staged before you said my name. 3 shadows in the glass, one truth I couldn't tame. You fed me half light, I wore it like a face. But even in the dark, I felt the shape of waste. Leave the shared fantasy, let it fall apart. The lie of clean hands, the truth at a heart. Truth over the fantasy, truth over the fantasy. I'm not begging to be real, I'm not begging to be real. The story was a cage, the story was a cage. The prize was getting out, the prize was getting out. I saw my name go dim in what we called repair. A room built out of me and panic in the air. I kept the smallest self alive beneath the blame. Now I can hear it breathe, now I can call it home. shared fantasy, let it crack and lift. What broke me open first was what I used to miss. Truth over the fantasy. Truth over the fantasy. I'm not begging to be real, I'm not begging to be real. The story was the cage, the story was the cage. The prize was getting out, the prize was getting out. I don't need the mirror to tell me who I am. I don't need the verdict of a shaking hand. I left the triangle, I left the borrowed light. What came back in its place was my own quiet light. Truth over the fantasy. Truth over the fantasy. I'm not begging to be real, I'm not begging to be real. The story was a cage, the story was a cage. The prize was getting out, the prize was getting out. Leave the shared fantasy, leave it in the dark. I kept my own pulse, I kept my own heart. Truth over the fantasy. Truth over the fantasy.